got done with this movie and woo! Assassins was a television show. This is a sequel. Let's talk about it. What is up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to my channel. Brand new action thriller called Fistful of Vengeance. And I was very intrigued, especially as someone who enjoyed Wu Assassins. Is this movie worth watching, even if you haven't seen that show? Let's talk about it. So, superpowered assassin Kai and his friends track down a killer from San Francisco's Chinatown to Thailand to avenge the death of a loved one. But their hunt soon entangles them with old enemies, a mysterious billionaire, and an ancient mystical force bent on, guess what, taking over the world. And first off, this movie is TVMA for violence, cursing, and one or two scenes that feature some sexual content, just in case you're planning on watching it with your family. So I would definitely not recommend this one for kids. But for those who are watching this film, it does come after the television show Wu Assassins. And the first question that will pop up is, can I watch this film without having watched that show? And my simple answer is, you can watch it for background noise and a couple of really good action scenes. Otherwise, you don't get a lot of depth from the characters in this film. So the idea here, or at least what they tried to do, is to give us a compelling story based off of what we already know. And if you don't already know it, you will probably be confused. Now, again, that being said, they do set up some new things, some new stakes, new lore in its entirety, and go much more in a fantastical direction with this movie. One of the things I enjoyed about Wu Assassins is, even though it does get over the top at various points throughout the series, there was still a grounded sensibility about it, at least with our characters. In this movie, it almost goes in a completely different direction. It feels much more, or shall I say, much less realistic than maybe I hoped it would. And I'm not one to sit back and say I can't stand cheesy martial arts movies, because most of the time I at least enjoy them. And there are enjoyable aspects about this film, especially when you look at the fight sequences. Less the cinematography, more the choreography. Iko Uwais is the name of note here, obviously from the Raid franchise, but also from a couple of movies like Mile 22 and Stuber. He continues to get cast in these roles, and really, you know, movies and television shows that aren't quite up to what I believe his standards should be. He's always good in them, but the projects themselves, they never quite work. And while Wu Assassins had some things going for it, it didn't fully deliver on what I hoped it would. This film, I think, even more so, because it just becomes so much more over the top than it needed to be, and you combine that with lackluster filmmaking, a lackluster script, and not showcasing what he's best at, and that is that choreography. He is incredible, as always. It's same thing over and over in this film. He's always good, and honestly, he's a good actor as well. But when you pair him with certain things that just don't complement his style, it doesn't really work at the end of the day. And I believe from the direction to the shot selection to, you know, other actors in here that maybe weren't the best actors, or they're not really good at the fight sequences, and the movie's having to film around them, meaning a lot of cutting and a lot of cutting away, and some cinematography that pulls back to where you can barely see what's going on in the background. And Austin, you always complain about these close-up shots and choppy action, this and that. The action is still kind of choppy in this film, but we do get some wide shots. I think some of these are too wide, because often we're getting a great action sequence happening, and you can tell there's one person in there that maybe isn't the best at handling these action scenes. So what the camera does is it will pull away, pull out of the scene, and one fight sequence in particular in the middle of the film, when we're in a parking garage and we're on top of a building and there's 3 different fight scenes happening, we'll pull away from one, kind of come around the building, zoom into another, pull back out, go back to the first, and then hit on the other one going on. So, you know, one continuous shot, which I appreciate, but sometimes you can go overboard. And understandably so, they're doing this, and then there are other fight scenes where they're doing a lot of cutting, a lot of editing around. They're doing this to hide what doesn't work, but you also have to show and complement what does work. And I do think there's some outstanding choreography in here. One fight sequence toward the end, which did get a bit mystical and fantastical, but I appreciated it nonetheless. Still, the fight sequences, the action, what you're here for, it was very up and down for me. And when you pair that with a story that is just so lackluster, I mentioned not a lot of character depth. Well, really, no character depth in this film. We start with a voiceover. We start with some very cheesy elements, and we just get thrown into the situation. So again, if you're coming in here fresh, you're not going to know a daggone thing going on. Also, what is it about these Netflix movies right now? Sex scenes that just come out of nowhere. Like, it was so random. It happened last week, happened again with this film. I mean, it was just so unnecessary to the context of what was happening with their characters. And it's such an integral moment emotionally. And I loved the conversation. I won't say who it was between those two characters. And then it just turns into a sex scene. It's like, that wasn't the emotion that we were at. It just didn't work. But then you have some great fights that I was just talking about, but most of them are masked by these VFX shots that didn't look all that great, and throwing in these supernatural powers on top of what could have been a very simplistic, action-heavy movie. I looked just a couple of years ago. The Night Comes for Us. Iko was also in that film, but it is a very scaled-back, simple story, nice script surrounding some awesome action sequences, and it's stuck to one tone. This film is so overboard, so cheesy. My biggest flaw, though, with the technical side of the filmmaking is the songs that play behind our fight sequences. And really, our movie as a whole, we go from hip-hop to dubstep to these kind of romantic pop songs, and it's scattered throughout the film. It's just like they didn't know what to put in there, so they just threw in what sound like modern pops. I hadn't heard a couple of them. Maybe that's because I'm out of the loop. But it's like, why not just give us an epic action score? And even though they're going slight Dragon Ball Z with it, and some moments kind of looked like the live-action Dragon Ball Z, you can still find a great score to complement that. So the soundtrack as well was something that I just wasn't a big fan of. And of course, at the end, they set up for a sequel. Again, there's one or two characters in here and one or two dynamics, brotherly dynamics, that I thoroughly enjoyed. But everything beyond that on the outside is just, it's a movie that didn't really know what it wanted to be at the end of the day. And before I give you guys my score, let me know, were you familiar with Wu Assassins? Are you watching this as a first-timer? Did it work for you? If you disagree, that's okay. And if you like this review and you want to support this video, drop that thumbs up down below. The choreography is excellent, and this allows certain action-packed scenes to hit hard, but everything surrounding that is messy and poorly constructed. My score is a 40% for this film. I did want to like it so much more, and I did kind of enjoy some of the action sequences. They're fun, especially if you're not fully paying attention to the film. Otherwise, looking forward to it as much as I wanted so much more from what this movie ended up being. So thanks again, guys, for watching. Stay tuned. More reviews to come.